What You Missed When You Didn't Exist. I am Corbett, and I am 53.
And I'm Lucy, and I'm 24. Bringing it
Huh?
in.
What? I'm Mike, and I'm 55.
Oh, the oldster's back. Actually, Mike's here for the fun thing, because I don't know if you know this. He has another podcast. Yes, another podcast. Not this one, not Safe for Half, but he also has Found in the Ruins, where he talks about the end of the world.
World.
Bum, bum, bum.
So I was wanting to talk to Lucy about the Cold War, and of course she came back immediately with, Dad, I've basically been through the Afghanistan war, and it's pretty much the same.
Okay, way to make me sound so terrible.
Hey.
Good gracious.
There was no Rambo in our Afghanistan.
This is true.
I mean,
Wait a minute. Rambo 3 was in Afghanistan.
but that was during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan.
Oh, that's true.
So that's completely different. If we had Rambo this time around, I'm sure it would have worked out great.
Anyway, so to pre-prep Lucy a tiny, tiny bit, I decided to have her watch the show that pretty much traumatized everyone in the generation, as far as the 80s are concerned, about the Cold War. The Day After. The ABC television movie that came out in 1983 that basically showed the horror of an actual war, of an actual nuclear bomb exchange in America. Now, it really only focuses on what happens in Kansas City to the town of Lawrence, which, by the way, the town of Lawrence is 40 miles away from Kansas City. I was kind of curious, so I looked it up. And at 40 miles, most of those people should be 100% dead.
Yep.
And by the way, spoilers, everyone dies. If you want a happy-go-lucky movie, it's on YouTube. Feel free to watch it anytime you want. I think towards the end, there's kind of a mention of, well, not a mention, but a nod to cannibalism when the people break into the farmer's yard and are basically just camping there, cooking something over the fire, even though every animal's been dead for a while. I don't know what they're cooking.
Maybe beef.
Possibly.
Maybe
possibly.
pork.
Could be tofu. Actually, you know, Mike, there's one thing. I rewatched this myself, and I don't know if you remember this. Everything dies when the blast goes off. Like, they run out. There's a point where they run out. The girl panics in the basement, runs out into the field. Steve Guttenberg chases after her. There's like dead cows, dead dogs. Everything in the field is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets her back in. And then later on, when they are told they can come out, it's been like a week later, so it's basically safe. and they hop on their horses and ride into town. Where did those horses come from? Did they have?
They were
horse
in the
basement?
horse bunker.
The horse bunker. I never thought about it as a kid. Like, oh yeah, the horses are fine.
I mean, you could say they were in the barn, which would at least keep the radioactive dust off them, probably. But who's going up to feed and water them for a week?
Yeah, that was
a bit much. Yeah,
I did not think about it as a kid. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah. And there were other little idiosyncrasies that kept changing between a really busy street to a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. Even though Lawrence is, again, 40 miles, that's like the distance from Denton to Dallas.
Yeah.
To give you a perspective. So if Dallas were hit, and most likely it would be,
yep,
you would probably not notice because you'd be dead.
If it was a ground burst, we would feel the shock wave, an air burst. There'd be the radiation, and
I think that's the thing I wanted to impose upon Lucy to let you know. It wasn't the fear of, oh, we would be at war. The Cold War was really a war that brings it home. It wasn't, we're sending our boys over to die for whatever the cause is. It's like, no, we're going to die. I mean, literally, I think probably 15 missiles would wipe out the U.S. in every conceivable way.
Nuclear missiles or regular missiles?
Nuclear missiles,
Okay.
Minuteman missiles. What was launched, they pointed out where the Minuteman missiles, they're called that because it takes a minute to launch them, and they take 30 minutes to reach their site.
And most of them had multiple warheads that would deploy so they could hit like 8 or 10 different targets from each missile.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
And the after effects would be a nuclear winter, which honestly would probably send the entire globe into
Global warming's fixed.
Oh my gosh.
hooray. See, it's the happy show.
See, it's all about marketing, guys. Marketing. And yeah, for Americans, pretty much our entire history up until World War II, shortly afterwards, wars for America were almost always us sending troops other places. The
Right.
Revolution and the Civil War were different, of course, but everywhere else, wars were over there. Starting with the Cold War, war was here.
Mhm.
And we lived with it every day.
Yep.
I mean, that was the thing. We had drills for it. You know, of course, you hide under your desk because that's going to protect you from the bomb.
You know, government documentation proved that part of the reason for that was they wanted to do that to make the civilians feel like there was a chance they could survive, and also
Like
to
that.
ensure bodies were in nice, orderly rows for easy identification.
Wow. Interesting.
Da 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 da.
Your government working for you.
Yeah, yeah. It makes for grim reading about the war, and I think it really first came home during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, because there was a missile base that was potentially going to be built in Cuba. This is before my time, so I can't really say for it, like,
Oh, before my
actually.
time.
But I'm just letting Lucy know, like, this
Yeah.
is 1962.
At that time, missiles weren't the big way to deliver weapons. It was bombers, and the U.S. Air Force was way bigger than the Soviet Air Force.
Right, and if they built a missile base in Cuba, they could get to the U.S. in 30 minutes. And that's when that really probably pushed the Minuteman project, because in 63 or 64, the Minuteman missile came out. And those were built all over the U.S. because these were the 30-minute launch.
30.
They could reach the Soviet Union in 30 minutes.
30 minutes or it's free.
It's
Terrible.
It's free.
Yeah, well,
Ah.
and that's the thing, you know. A lot of it was you almost had to laugh because, you know,
Ugh.
every day, even in the back of our minds, you know, it was always that idea that within an hour we could all be dead.
Actually, I think John Lithgow pointed that out. He's the scientist who's more or less Mr. Exposition for the show.
Mhm.
He's the one who points out, like, well, these are Minuteman missiles. They have 30 minutes to reach their targets. Either they fired first, which means we're about to be hit, or in 30 minutes, they will be launching theirs anyway. So
Right.
we've got about an hour or less.
And 1983, the year Day After came out, is pretty interesting. Which, by the way, releasing the day after, 5 days before Thanksgiving. Who thought that was a good idea?
Get your family together or else.
They gotta make it a blockbuster hit. Bring the family. Watch the
Yeah,
show.
everybody, and 100 million Americans watched it. So, you know, obviously they did that well. Although I noticed that advertisers, they ran no advertisements once the bombs actually started dropping. Because as somebody said, who wants to see Lawrence in a fireball and then go to an Orville Redenbacher commercial?
You remember when things weren't radioactive?
Mom and Dad just got popped. And speaking of popping,
Oh my gosh.
but the thing is, in September of 1983, there almost was a nuclear war.
That's
The
true.
Soviet Union almost launched missiles on us because their defense system picked up 4 U.S. missiles being launched from Kansas and South Dakota. And the only thing that saved us was because they so mistrusted their own systems. Their own systems were so crappy that they wouldn't launch until they had the creator of the system on to tell them, is this really happening or not? And the creator said, no, it's not happening. The Americans would not
Mm.
launch 4 missiles. And it turned out, no, they were just picking up sunlight bouncing off a cumulus cloud.
He was actually kind of well known after that, too.
Yeah, he got a UN award. And the Soviet military thanked him by immediately retiring him.
Oh.
Our system is perfect, and you will never say otherwise.
Yes. Well, at least they didn't, like, send him to a gulag or something. I suppose it's worse.
I did a quick look up, too, because I was like, how many times does it happen? And the list goes on quite a bit.
Yeah, more than we
Way
would feel.
more.
Yeah, and of course, none of us at the time knew any of this.
Yeah. Well, War Games was a great example. We will probably have to cover War Games at some point too, but
Yeah.
War Games that was the one that scared Reagan.
Yeah. That's what got him with the idea of the missile defense shield.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea of war games, an accidental launch, that was a thing, you know? We could die in an hour and it might not even be malicious. Just
Yeah,
somebody's system, either the Soviets or ours, screwed up and launched.
basically.
But yeah, I remember watching the day after, including the viewpoint conversation afterwards with a bunch of talking heads.
Oh, yeah.
And the 1-800 number they were suggesting you call if the movie upset you.
As it should.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm curious. Were you as upset? Because I know, for me, I was pretty upset, but I was always freaking out. But for you, it's like the Wonderland happening because you were always
I
watching the
didn't want a nuclear
post-apocalyptic stuff.
war. Hey, for me at the time, I was 14, so that was a bit ago. But it was more just, yeah, and yeah, there was nothing really surprising out of that. I even owned Iostat tablets, which I bought either
Oh.
at the time or shortly thereafter, which were supposedly these thyroid blockers, which would keep your thyroid from absorbing radiation. I don't know if they would have worked or not. I think they might be off their expiration at this point.
Well, you had the survivalist bug.
Right.
You were
Right.
you
We
were
thought there would be, and the best
preparing.
thing to deal with it was to try to learn how to survive it. Of course, I learn now most of the information going around the survivalists was bull puckies, because it would have been a lot worse.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. At the end of the day after, there's actually a disclaimer that says, "We don't think this would actually be this bad."
It would be worse.
We hope no, we hope that people will see this and talk to their political leaders to de-escalate this before it gets to anything this bad. And the thing is, it is way nice considering that people survive at a 40-mile blast radius. That seems unlikely.
Yeah, a year after this, the BBC, it was either the BBC or Sky News, I don't remember which, but maybe ITN. Anyway, they created their version called Threads,
Oh yeah.
which is like to the day after, like the Warriors was to welcome back Cotter. I mean, it was, whoa, it is dark.
Well, Russia made one too.
Did they?
87? Yeah, they made one in 87 because by then the wall was about to come down.
Yeah,
So
that was Gorbachev and Glasnost and
it's okay to talk about things now. And apparently it was horrific, but I don't know, I've never seen it.
But yeah, it was a terrible time. And it didn't help that a lot of people were like, this is just communist propaganda. This isn't real. Or the best way to stop a nuclear war is to have even more missiles.
Oh, yeah. Fight fire with fire. Obviously, that's the best
Even though
solution.
90% of strategy involved launching when you detected the other guys coming in. So the idea that they're going to somehow get a surprise on you and destroy your arsenal on the ground was, by the 80s, was ridiculous. It just wasn't going to happen.
Do you actually have a count? I was looking it up, and there's a lot of variation on what the total count of current missiles there are. Because the last I heard was like closer to 15 to 20,000. I was looking at more contemporary numbers that say it's only like 6, and like 6,000, not 6 missiles.
Well, the thing you got to check is it referring to missiles or warheads?
Oh, yeah.
Because,
that
like
would
I
make a
said,
difference.
missiles today, both ours and Russia's and China's, you have one missile that can carry up to 12 warheads. So it's only one missile, but it's hitting 12 targets.
Yay! Everybody wins.
Although, speaking of missiles, that was something I mentioned to my students, that everybody in the 70s and 80s were terrified because the Russians had so many more missiles than we did. And how they were afraid that the Russians would launch a surprise attack, destroy all our missiles, and still have enough left over to threaten our cities. It's like, well, one, most of our targets were too close to cities to begin with. So,
Mm.
but second, it turned out that you find out afterwards, the Soviets had twice as many missiles of ours because they themselves fully expected only half of them to even launch.
Wow.
Or if they did launch, they weren't going to hit a target. They were going to like go down in the North Pole or even part of Russia, you know. They were so convinced only half their missiles would launch. But of course, they couldn't tell us that
Mhm.
because that sort of defeats the purpose of a deterrence.
Ultimately, the Cold War was a lot of anxiety and a lot of built up frustration and fear and everything else.
Yeah.
But luckily, we beat the Soviets by having Evel Knievel jump over the Berlin Wall, and now everything's cool, everything's fine.
And we're
And
living
so how
happily ever
Yeah.
after.
So Lucy, how has being absolutely free of all communist threats been for you?
What a world. What a world this is. We're still talking to Russia. I don't know if we're on the good side of things or on the bad side of things. It seems very much like a social media battle almost, because we have our current president Trump talking to Vladimir Putin, and they just are either besties or the biggest frenemies or something along those lines. Because
You would go to a Taylor Swift reference. You know how the Russians are. They are just, you know.
it just seems like we are upset at them, but I think we still have these Cold War fears that linger, and so I think I feel like that's one of the real reasons that we still have beef with Russia. I mean, the Ukraine war is also a thing that's going on, and they're not really like letting up about that, but I feel like it's still that lingering fear and that lingering essence.
That's a valid
So,
point, especially from the Russian point of view, because Putin has built his reign in Russia on nostalgia for the Soviet Union, the old
mhm.
days when Russia was an equal to the United States. Turned out they never really were, but the world certainly thought they were, so that's good enough, I guess.
Yeah, it's just weird.
Yeah.
That's a way to say it.
I think most of culture today is also revolving around this idea of crazy fear or crazy hope, because most of my time growing up, there was like the Mayan calendars running up. We're gonna die. I mean, I was born after Y2K happened, and everyone thought we were gonna die when Y2K happened, and then COVID happened, and so that was like a big apocalypse moment of we're all gonna die. So I'm kind of numb to the we're all gonna die mentality. Because at this point, it's happened like 8 times.
Here's a secret. The United States was going to collapse, and it was something to be afraid of as far back as the 1880s. It's
Mm.
always something. Then it was poor people were going to overthrow us and take over and kill all the rich. That is today, isn't it? Anyway, it was started back then, and then it became in the 20s, it was the commies are coming to get us. Then World War II, the commies are our friends. And then after World War II, the commies are our enemies again. We always love scaring ourselves. Somebody's coming to get us. Corbett, you remember the 80s. Japan was coming to get us. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, because they had all the technology.
Right. They were the technology. They were the future. We were the past. Japan's just going to end up buying us all out and controlling us from Tokyo. Well, the 90s happened and that didn't happen. And now it's China.
Oh, jeez.
We're always scared of somebody.
Tokyo is the largest city in the world. I looked it up by population. Tokyo is the largest one.
Bigger than Shanghai.
It was like 40 million people that live there. I was mostly looking up because I was curious. I was looking at statistics like I always do. How many bombs would it take to get to the center of the Earth?
A Tootsie Roll.
Yeah. I was like, okay, how many major cities are there? And I went and looked them all up by population. Tokyo is top of the list. I
Wow.
was surprised. Houston was like 61. So there's a lot of cities out there.
Tokyo has more people than Texas.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Tokyo,
disturbing.
the city.
the city has, and I'm sure that involves suburbs too and all, but still,
More than likely.
that's a lot. Almost as many as California.
Well, New York and LA were like in the top 10. I don't remember what their population was, but most of them, I think the first 30 cities were at least 10 million or more.
Yeah.
Well, I heard Shanghai's like 25.
But I was just kind of speculating that, okay, so 30 missiles would basically destroy all civilization and more or less destroy the world because, the fallout and after effects of that. But that's beside the point because that'll never happen because all those bombs were destroyed and thrown away and nobody's going to use them.
How do you destroy a bomb without using it?
You can deactivate them.
Yeah, you can. There has been a process.
Ukraine gave up 10,000 nuclear warheads in return for a promise from both Russia and the U.S. that their borders would not ever be violated. Glad that worked out, huh?
Jeez.
Nice.
Yeah. And now China's expanding their arsenals, so we may be in a new Cold War with the Chinese because we're always scared of somebody.
That's true, unfortunately.
No, there's no trust, no hope in this world. We gotta rebuild it.
Plus, you can get people on your side easier if you scare them. You've got to go along with me or they're going to come and get you. And the left and the right do that.
Yeah, it's all about power.
Yep.
Power!
So the happy note is what?
You can watch a really old movie and be somewhat bored by it by the beginning and then realize, oh, what do people do when the world ends? That was actually a point that I thought would be cool to bring up was it seemed like the first movie to really dig into that idea of, oh, what would you do if the world ended? Like, would you leave people behind? Would you try to help people? It digs into that essence of humanity and who are we as people? Are we animals or are we humans?
Yeah. That's something I think a lot of post-apocalyptic books, films, whatnot get, I think, a little wrong, is I think it constantly underestimates humans' willingness to help each other. Literally, the moment there's any type of crisis or the zombies arise or the bombs fall or whatever, somebody blows a whistle and we immediately start shivving each other in Kroger for a rusty can of dog food or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how people generally work. Now, will people act that way? Sure. But everyone? No.
That is a good point. Feels like there's a lot of bad guys because of the impact they have on good people.
Right. It builds drama. That's really what it boils down to. One thing I will say for The Day After, it is far and away not Steve Guttenberg's worst movie.
Oh?
Have you watched Police Academy?
Hey, Police Academy's funny.
No, Police Academy 1 was funny.
Oh, okay.
The rest were not.
Here's an interesting fun bit. During the California wildfires, Steve Guttenberg was the guy who was running up and down the street moving cars so that firefighters could get through.
Hey, that's cool.
Everybody was like leaving their cars out in the way. He was running up and down the street and this reporter stopped him and said, "What's going on?" It's like, "I'm moving these cars from here to there. If you get your car off the street, these firefighters can get where they got to go." I was like, "Who are you?" "I'm Steve Guttenberg." And he runs off.
Yeah, they should have made a movie out of it.
It was like, holy crap, Steve Guttenberg.
See, good people exist.
That's true. I think you're right. I think when the chips are down, the average person is going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Because you're going to try to save people before you try to hurt them.
I think so.
I would hope.
Well, I think there's far more examples of that in crises than not, historically speaking. So.
Yeah, that's true.
On the other hand, social media, maybe that'll ruin it.
Way to flip the pancake.
No, it's called covering your butt as a historian,
As a historian. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so this has been a cover of the Cold War.
And the Day After.
And the Day After. For those listening, what you missed when you didn't exist. And don't worry, we'll get to cover the fall of the Berlin Wall and, of course, more importantly, Evel Knievel. But in the meantime, make sure to tune in and check out Found in the Ruins, Mike's podcast about the post-apoc if you want to find out what happened after the day after. But until then, I'm Corbett, and keep helping people.
Yeah, do good. Be the good you see in the world. Is that the quote? What's the Gandhi quote? be the good. What is
Be
it?
excellent to each other.
Yes, be excellent. And
Party on,
party
dude!
on, dudes.
I'm sure that was Gandhi, wasn't it?
Pretty sure that was Gandhi.
Yeah.
Or Abraham Lincoln. I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, one of those two. Yeah.